Isaac Newton. In the year 1665, a terrible sickness called the Great Plague was spreading across England. It was a scary time. Thousands of people were dying in the cities, and schools like Cambridge University had to close down. A young student named Isaac Newton had to pack his bags and go back to his family's farm in the countryside to hide from the disease. Most people would have just sat around and waited for the world to get better, but Newton spent his time thinking about how the universe worked. At that time, science was mostly based on old stories and guesses. Nobody really knew why things fell down or how the planets stayed in the sky. People thought the rules in space were different from the rules on Earth. One afternoon, Newton was sitting under an apple tree on the farm. He saw an apple fall to the ground. He didn't just see a piece of fruit, he saw a mystery. He wondered if the same force that pulled the apple down was the same force that kept the moon from flying away into the dark. He spent months doing the math, and eventually proved that gravity is a universal law. He wrote a book that explained that everything with mass pulls on everything else. This discovery changed everything. But Newton didn't stop there. He took a piece of glass called a prism and showed that white light is actually made of all the colors of the rainbow. He even had to invent a whole new type of math called calculus just to prove his ideas. Before Newton, the world was a collection of magic and guesses. After Newton, we had a map of the laws of nature. He gave us the math to build bridges, fly planes, and eventually land on the moon. Without his work during that plague, our modern world wouldn't exist. Johannes Gutenberg. If you lived in the early 1400s, you lived in a world without news. You didn't know what was happening in the next town, and you definitely didn't know what was happening in other countries. Books were incredibly rare and expensive. Every single book had to be written by hand by monks. A monk would sit in a small room for years, slowly copying every letter of a Bible by hand. Because it took so much work, a single book could cost as much as a house. Only the richest kings and church leaders owned them. This meant that the people at the top could control all the information. If you were a normal person, you had to believe whatever they told you because you had no way to check the facts for yourself. Johannes Gutenberg was a goldsmith who was struggling with debt. He needed a way to make money, and he had a brilliant idea. He looked at how people pressed grapes to make wine, and realized he could use a machine to press ink onto paper. He created movable type, which were tiny metal blocks with a single letter on each one. He could arrange these blocks to form any sentence he wanted. Once the page was set, his machine could print 1,000 copies in a single day. He printed the first mass-produced Bible, and the world changed instantly. Books became cheap. People everywhere started learning to read. They started reading about science, religion, and their own human rights. This led to the Renaissance and the scientific revolution. Gutenberg didn't just invent a machine, he invented a way for the human race to share its brain. He broke the lock on information and gave the key to every person on Earth. Christopher Columbus. In 1492, the world was a much smaller place in the minds of people in Europe. They knew about Europe, Africa, and parts of Asia, but they thought there was nothing but a huge empty ocean to the west. Christopher Columbus was an explorer who had a very dangerous plan. He believed he could sail west across the Atlantic Ocean and reach India. He spent years trying to get kings to pay for his trip, but most of them laughed at him. They told him the ocean was too big and that his ships would never make it. Finally, the king and queen of Spain agreed to give him 3 small ships. The voyage was a nightmare. The crew was terrified they would run out of food or fall off the edge of the world. They were ready to kill Columbus and turn the ships back, but on October 12, a lookout finally spotted land. Columbus thought he was in Asia, but he had actually hit the Caribbean islands. He had no idea he had stumbled onto 2 massive continents that Europe didn't know existed. This moment changed the map of the world forever. It started the Columbian Exchange, where the Old World and the New World traded plants, animals, and ideas for the first time. Europe got potatoes, corn, and chocolate. The Americas got horses and cattle, but it also brought deadly diseases that wiped out millions of people. This discovery led to the rise of global empires and the world we live in today. Columbus shifted the entire course of history by accidentally hitting a new world. Napoleon Bonaparte. Napoleon Bonaparte started as a nobody. He was a short, skinny soldier from a small island called Corsica. He spoke French with a funny accent and didn't have much money, but during the chaos of the French Revolution, he saw a chance to rise. He was a genius at war. He knew exactly where to put his cannons and how to trick his enemies. He won battle after battle, and by 1804, he had become so powerful that he crowned himself the Emperor of France. He led his massive army across Europe, crushing almost every country that tried to stop him. At his peak, he controlled almost the entire continent. But Napoleon wasn't just about fighting. He changed how society worked. Before him, you got a good job or a title based on who your father was. Napoleon created a set of laws called the Napoleonic Code. These laws said that people should get jobs based on their talent and hard work, not their family name. He also gave people the right to have a fair trial and protected religious freedom. He spread these ideas across Europe by force. Even after he was finally defeated at the Battle of Waterloo and sent to a lonely island, his impact stayed. He destroyed the old system of kings and queens and paved the way for modern, fair countries. He proved that a person from nothing could conquer the world, and he left behind a set of laws that many countries still use today. He was like a storm that tore down the old world and started the building of the new one. Karl Marx. In the mid-1800s, the world was changing faster than ever. The Industrial Revolution was happening, and huge factories were popping up everywhere. People were moving from farms to cities to work in these factories. But life for the workers was a living nightmare. They worked 14 to 16 hours a day in dangerous, dirty conditions for almost no money. Even small children had to work near heavy machinery. While the factory owners became incredibly rich, the workers lived in slums and died young from disease. Karl Marx was a philosopher who looked at this and got very angry. He believed that the entire system was broken and that a revolution was coming. In 1848, he wrote a small book called the Communist Manifesto. He argued that all of history was just a big fight between the rich and the poor. He said that the workers should rise up, take control of the factories, and share everything equally. He wanted a world where there were no classes and no private property. At the time, his book didn't sell many copies, and he died poor and unknown. But his ideas stayed alive. In the 20th century, his books inspired massive revolutions in Russia, China, and many other countries. These revolutions led to the rise of the Soviet Union and the Cold War, which divided the entire planet for decades. Whether you agree with him or not, Karl Marx's writing completely reshaped the politics, economy, and history of the modern world. He turned an idea into a global movement that changed the lives of billions and defined the 20th century. Albert Einstein. In 1905, a young man named Albert Einstein was working a boring job in a patent office in Switzerland. He spent his days checking other people's inventions, but in his head, he was rethinking the entire universe. For hundreds of years, people followed the rules set by Isaac Newton. They thought time and space were simple and fixed. They thought a second was a second for everyone, everywhere. Einstein realized this was wrong. He came up with the theory of relativity. He proved that time can actually slow down or speed up depending on how fast you are moving. It sounds like science fiction, but it is a fundamental law of physics. He also came up with the most famous equation in history, E=mc². This tiny formula proved that a small amount of matter could be turned into a massive amount of energy. This discovery changed everything we knew about nature. It explained how the stars shine and how the universe began, but it also had a terrifying dark side. It provided the science needed to build the atomic bomb. During World War II, Einstein wrote a letter to the US president warning him that the Nazis were trying to use his science to build a nuclear weapon. This led to the Manhattan Project and the birth of the atomic age. Einstein was a man of peace, but his brain gave humanity the power to destroy itself. Every time you use a GPS on your phone today, you are using Einstein's math, because the satellites in space have to account for time moving differently, just like he predicted. Adolf Hitler. Hitler started as a failed artist and a lonely soldier in World War I. He was angry that Germany had lost the war and was in a state of economic collapse. He used his talent for public speaking to spread a message of hate, fear, and national pride. He told the German people that they were a master race and that all their problems were caused by Jewish people and other minorities. He rose to power in 1933 and quickly turned Germany into a brutal dictatorship. He rebuilt the German military and began invading neighboring countries, which started World War II, the deadliest and most destructive conflict in human history. The impact of Hitler was pure horror. He was responsible for the Holocaust, which was the systematic murder of 6 million Jewish people and millions of others in concentration camps. He turned entire cities into rubble and caused the deaths of over 70 million people worldwide. His actions forced the entire world to change forever. The war he started led to the creation of the United Nations to prevent future wars, the start of the Cold War, and the founding of the State of Israel. It changed how humanity thinks about human rights and war crimes. Hitler is the ultimate example of how one person's hate, combined with absolute power, can tear the entire world apart. History is permanently divided into before and after the horror he created, and we still live with the results of his terrible decisions today. Mahatma Gandhi. At the start of the 1900s, India was ruled by the British Empire. The British took India's resources and treated the Indian people like second-class citizens in their own home. There were laws that said Indians couldn't even make their own salt. Most people thought the only way to get freedom was through a bloody war, but Mahatma Gandhi had a different idea. He was a lawyer who believed that you could defeat a powerful empire without ever picking up a gun. He called his method satyagraha, which means truth force. He taught people to fight with non-violence and peaceful protest. He led massive marches that captured the world's attention. His most famous was the Salt March, where he walked 240 miles to the sea to protest a British tax. He went on long hunger strikes, refusing to eat for weeks until the violence stopped. He told his followers to never fight back, even when they were being beaten or arrested by the police. This made the British look like bullies to the rest of the world. His message of peace eventually became too powerful for the British to stop. In 1947, India finally gained its independence. Gandhi proved that moral power is stronger than military power. His ideas didn't just free India. They inspired people all over the world, including Martin Luther King Jr. and Nelson Mandela. He changed the world by showing us that you don't need a weapon to win a revolution. You just need the truth and the courage to stand your ground peacefully. Martin Luther King Jr. In the 1950s, the United States was a deeply divided country. In many states, black people were treated as inferior by the law. There were separate schools, separate water fountains, and separate neighborhoods. Black people were forced to sit at the back of the bus and were often prevented from voting. It was a system of legalized racism called segregation. Martin Luther King Jr. was a young preacher who decided to lead the fight for civil rights. Inspired by the work of Gandhi, he insisted on using nonviolence. He believed that hate could not drive out hate. Only love and justice could do that. He led the Montgomery bus boycott, where thousands of black people refused to ride the bus for over a year until the laws were changed. He led marches through dangerous cities where protesters were attacked with dogs and fire hoses. Through it all, he never fought back. In 1963, he stood in front of the Lincoln Memorial and gave his famous "I Have a Dream" speech. He spoke of a future where his children would be judged by their character, not their skin color. His leadership led to the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act, which changed the laws of the United States forever. He didn't just change the law, he changed the heart of the nation. He showed that a single voice speaking for justice can move a mountain of hate and change the course of a superpower. Steve Jobs. Before the 1970s, computers were massive machines that filled entire rooms. They were only used by big companies and the military. The idea that a normal person would want a computer in their house seemed crazy to almost everyone. But Steve Jobs was a college dropout who saw a different future. He and his friend Steve Wozniak started Apple in a garage. They wanted to make computers small, beautiful, and easy for everyone to use. Jobs was a perfectionist. He didn't just care about how the computer worked. He cared about how it looked and how it felt to use it. He revolutionized the world multiple times. First, he made the personal computer popular with the Macintosh. Then, he changed the music industry with the iPod and iTunes. But his biggest impact came in 2007 when he walked onto a stage and pulled an iPhone out of his pocket. He combined a phone, a computer, and a music player into one tiny device that fit in your hand. This started the smartphone revolution. Today, billions of people carry a supercomputer in their pocket every single day. We use them for everything, from talking to friends to running businesses. Steve Jobs changed how we communicate, how we work, and how we live our daily lives. He didn't just invent products. He changed our relationship with technology forever. He put the world's information at our fingertips and made the future happen faster.